Hello there, and welcome back. We're joined by Yvonne. Hi, Yvonne. How are you?
Good morning. Not too bad. Got a bit of a cold. Apart from that, I'm pretty good, thanks.
Oh gosh, yeah, we're both full of cold at the moment, so we'll have to see how the recording goes. So, could you tell us about who you are and your MS journey?
So, yes, my name is Yvonne. I'm married and I live in Shropshire. Retired now. Diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, primary progressive version of, in 2013. So, what's that? 15 years ago now. In fact, it will be on the 31st of May. And that date is emblazoned in my memory. And I live a kind of happy life. I keep myself pretty active with some volunteering work, which I do for the MS Trust, and also I volunteer at a group helping older adults get online, so helping them learn how to use technology. Particularly in accessing healthcare information, advice, booking appointments. So many people just haven't had the opportunity to make that technological transition that society seems to require us to. And what else? I do a bit of work for NICE, working on clinical guidelines, knowing that I had a career in health and social care, and I've got quite a lot of knowledge that I felt it was important to keep using my brain and keep using it for benefit where I was able to. So my MS journey was one of a lot of frustration around the early stages. I was probably 5 years plus with MS before it was diagnosed. In fact, maybe as much as 9 years. Symptoms in my feet that I tried to ignore, loss of sensation and loss of proprioception, so the awareness of where my feet were all began to feel very muddled. And I did go to my GP a couple of times and got referred to sort of physios and orthotists and had insoles and advice. Nobody could really identify what the problem was and certainly couldn't fix it. In fact, I went to see an orthopedic surgeon because they thought it was a neuroma of some sort in my foot that they were going to surgically remove. Fortunately, I didn't go down that route because that's not what it was. And then I had some bladder and bowel symptoms that resulted in all sorts of unpleasant and invasive investigations to try and figure out what was going on with my bowel. There was all sorts of thoughts that it was a functional or a physiological problem of some sort. So I was seeing a colorectal surgeon, started to see urologists with regards to the bladder problem. And then I don't know what happened that made me make my surgeon aware that I'd got these sensation losses in my legs, for him to then think, oh, maybe what's going on in your bladder and your bowel is neurological rather than physiological. And that resulted in a referral to a neurologist and getting MRI scans and eventually a lumbar puncture to make the formal diagnosis of MS. And when that came, it was a bit of a body blow. I'm an occupational therapist by professional background, although I haven't worked clinically for a number of years, had moved into management and leadership. But in my time working for social services particularly, I'd worked with people with MS, all of whom had got very serious consequences as a result of their disease. And so for me, that's what MS meant. I didn't have a broader understanding of the range of diagnoses. I'd never actually even heard of primary progressive MS. And so it all came as a kind of a mixed shock and an unexpected piece of information that probably I did know in the back of my mind that it had to be something like that. The bigger shock came, though, when I was told there was no treatment for it. What I knew of MS, people would say, well, there's good treatments now. It's not something that needs to go unchecked. But as my neurologist told me, for primary progressive MS at that time, certainly, I know that since ocrelizumab has come on the scene, and that does suit some people with PPMS and act as a good treatment. But for me, it wasn't available then. And so when I went with my husband to hear about how we were going to manage this thing, that was the answer. There's nothing. And that was more of a shock than the diagnosis, I think. I got the diagnosis and then was expecting somebody to say, and we'll start you on treatment sort of next week or the week after or something, and we'll get this thing under control. And so that was really quite difficult. What happened quite early on for me was a referral to the MS nurse services. And I was, I think, lucky in that I was being seen in a big tertiary hospital where I actually worked. And so I was able to navigate myself around the services perhaps more easily than other people might be able to. And I got to see a functional bowel nurse quite quickly on, and then referred to an MS nurse who took me under her wing. And from then until now, I have good support from the MS nurse services, and I have an annual review with one of those who's, because I moved, we changed service, but they picked me up pretty quickly after the move. And I see the same person now. I've got continuity and input that really helps me to know that I've got somebody to go to if I've got some new challenges, and somebody who really understands the breadth and depth of the disease and how it can affect different people in different ways, and know how symptom management can be probably the best option. So, yeah, I mean, I was told several times that PPMS was probably the worst type of MS to have, but I don't think that's true. I think, you have your own MS, and regardless of the label that's applied to it, you and it will go on a journey together that will be unique to you.
Yeah, so you were first diagnosed with primary progressive MS. That was your first diagnosis. Yeah. And just going back to that, Yvonne, like, how did you feel emotionally at that time?
I was pretty shell-shocked, and I kind of thought my life was coming to an end. Everything that I'd planned for, hoped for, dreamed of, not just me, but my husband, our life just seemed the bottom fell out of it, I think. And I'm fairly certain, looking back, that there was a period of at least 6 months where I was probably clinically depressed. I sort of disengaged with everything. And although I was getting good support at my place of work, which you'd hope, NHS Trust, you'd hope it would be able to support people with these kind of challenges. So despite that positive support, I just, there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of, why me? I don't deserve this. This is, what have I done to make this happen? Lots of self-recrimination. Although I knew there was nothing, cognitively, I knew that it was my lot that had somehow come home to roost. You can't help but think, I think, going through those initial weeks and months, that if you'd have done something differently, that life would have been different. So I pretty much kept things to myself and my husband for the initial period, but then I decided to get angry at it. And I think this is probably a normal grief reaction. Your loss of your health and your future is shocking, and you go through those stages of losing something, and what you've lost is your health, and the potential for you to be a person that you know now that you're never going to be able to be, or you think that. You kind of go to the darkest place, and I certainly did presume the worst kind of outcomes. I was deteriorating quite rapidly around that time, and I foresaw myself in a wheelchair within a year, and having to give up work, and everything was very, very negative in my head for the first period that I was very much introspectively dwelling on how awful it all was. So then I think I just positively decided, I said, to get angry and just share.
Yeah.
Rather than keep it all to myself, I was just going to share it with everybody. And so I made appointments, as it were, to go and see people, so other members of my family. And I don't think I'd even told my parents early on, because I knew that they would be absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
In fact, my father had already died, and I remember recalling, thank goodness, that he wasn't around to learn this piece of news, because he particularly, was very close to my father, he particularly would have found it very difficult to deal with. My mum was very stoical, as she just is. You just get what's dealt you and you crack on, deal with it, kind of thing. So yes, I made appointments to make sure that I got people's attention when I was speaking to them and sharing the news. I didn't want it to just be a dismissive, throwaway part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And then I decided to do the skydive for the MS Trust, and put my devastation to positive purpose, and then I wrote individually an email to everybody in the trust that I worked in. So I think there was about 9,000 people at the time, and just shared,
Yeah.
big and loud, this has happened to me, but kind of, I'm not going to let it beat me, was my new take on things. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but at that early stage. But I guess that was the first year or so of getting very self-absorbed and low, and then trying to come out the other side feeling a bit more in control. Yeah, I think that's what it was, wanting to feel in control of it, rather than it being in control of me, insofar as I could,
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people listening to this, Yvonne, will probably share that same experience that you were talking about, going through grief, and
Yeah.
actually, and having those thoughts of like, what did I do to deserve this? And, it must have been something that you've done, and taking that all in. So, yeah. And when you were sharing and doing the skydive and everything, would you say, was that how you were sort of coping with the diagnosis?
Yes, I think it was. Yeah, it's kind of get myself out of me, and because there was no other way to manage it, it was what it was, and I needed to do something to try and change that. So there was no treatment. So what was I going to do? So I went into survival mode and try and find out everything I could about the disease. That's when I first turned, I think, really properly to the MS Trust for the information that I found really useful there about all the sort of symptoms that I was experiencing, psychological as well as the physical ones. Because my neurologist, pretty blunt guy, brilliant in that he didn't spin me any yarns about how we were going to get on top of this. And because I did speak to other neurologists who said they at least would have tried some kind of steroid treatment. But I thought, well, what's the point of just trying to ameliorate this if actually I'd be just trying to find hope where there shouldn't be any, because as my own neurologist explained, all that would be being done would be dampening some of the symptoms, and at that time some of those treatments were causing more problems than they were creating solutions. So if that wasn't going to be a survival route for me, I think I just tried to get on the front foot and do what I could to keep in control of things. So it was then really that I started to really focus on keeping fit, I was already a kind of healthy eater, healthy lifestyle doer-ish. You know, I worked really long hours, didn't prioritize me over other things. So I just shifted the dial on that somewhat, and started to get an exercise regimen that meant I could keep myself fit and strong. Fortunately for me, my motor nerves have not been significantly damaged. So, you know, even now I walk well. No, I don't. I walk, and part of that I put down to having kept really strong, good muscle fitness, muscle strength, and to kind of use that to control some of the other symptoms.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing. Have you got any tips, Yvonne, for anyone listening to this who's worried about their MS progressing?
Well, I suppose that's one of them. You know, be as fit and healthy as you can be, because the MS is damaging parts of your body, but there are parts that it's not reaching or hasn't been able to reach yet. So to keep functioning the parts of your body that can is really important. And we know that that the body has a tremendous capacity to sort of self-heal and find different ways of getting messages from the brain to bits of our body. So the more active we can be, even within the limits of whatever damage the MS has already done, I think that not only gives you a sense of control, but also does physically give you some control over what your body's able to do and continue to do. So keep fit and healthy, I would say, is probably top of my list. Live your life is another one. You know, don't let the MS become your sole focus. When I was initially diagnosed, I think MS was front and foremost in my mind. Whenever I was speaking to anybody, doing anything, MS was here. You know, it was all I could see, really. And for a while, it was all I could talk about as well. You know, I would have conversations with people. I would make sure that somehow I managed to get it into the conversation that they probably didn't know, but you know, I'm struggling with this thing that you can't really see, but it's here and it's with me all the time. But as time went on and I focused on other things, then gradually it's still always with me, but it's back here now, and I can choose to let it in or not, depending on what the circumstances are. So I guess just hang on to that knowledge that any kind of grief or loss becomes more manageable and less of a focus as time goes on. So that makes it easier to say, live your best life, live your life. Don't kind of leave things till tomorrow. It's a good mantra for anybody. Nobody knows what's around their next corner. But to have a diagnosis of MS just brings that very centrally. So I got on and just did the traveling that I wanted to do, did the things that I wanted to do, knowing that I may not have the physical capacity in the future or knowing that was a potential to not have the physical capacity in the future. But as it is, I've been very fortunate that my deterioration has really slowed down over those intervening years. And so I haven't lost the function that I dreaded that I would. But there are still things that I know now I can't do. And I'm so glad that I just got on and did them when I was able to. So get on, live your best life. I know that sounds a bit kind of cliched, but that's what it is. Do what you want to do insofar as you're able to, as soon as you're able to do it. And the last thing I think I want to say is don't assume everything that's going on with your body is anything to do with MS. If we get a tendency to just, I've certainly did, to put everything down to MS. And I found with a lot of my bowel symptoms that actually, strangely, I've got colitis as well. And if I'd have just assumed that to have all been my MS and not gone and got it investigated, I wouldn't be able to manage it in the way that I do. So MS brings all sorts of new and challenging symptoms, but they may not all be MS. So make sure that you seek out help from GP, neurologist, MS nurse. Make sure you've got that team of people wrapped around you. It's something you can expect to have, and each healthcare provider set up should be able to do that. So if you haven't got those people as your sort of touchstones, it's really important to make sure that you find out how to get them.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. That's so many tips, so many different things to think about as well. So we really appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And as well, a big shout out to you for all of the volunteering and all of the support that you give to the MS Trust. We really, really do appreciate it.
Thanks. Really welcome.